Thank you for coming. Glad to see such a great turnout tonight. I'm John Kennington, President, Tulsa Audubon. Let's going to start out with our recorder's report. Is Paul here? No, okay, he was thinking about coming. But some of the birds, a lot of late purple martins. A couple of the birds that were sort of hanging around a little late were willow flycatcher, purple finch, eastern wood pewee, a Bell's vireo, and summer tanager, and some of the early arrivals were snow geese and an eared grebe. And there was really the only rare bird was a neotropic cormorant on Lake Yohola on October 13th, just a couple days ago. So I don't know if that's hanging around or not, but Tuesday morning birders get anything good? Any of you guys who are here? Okay. Let's see, a couple things is our annual birdseed sale is now in effect, and I've got some order forms on the back table out there. And if you have any questions about it's the same products that we've offered every year, but if you have not ordered before, you can just come talk to me after the meeting, and I can describe what things that are available. The way our birdseed sale works is you'll pre-order and prepay for your birdseed, and it will be delivered on. You can pick it up on November 3rd, and basically it's at my house, which is at 111th Memorial area. And if you can't come on that Sunday, you can come the next few days also, but you'll come pick it up. So you pre-order your seed and then come pick it up. We don't stock it throughout the year, we just have a one-time sale. So you can, if you like, you can order a good supply to get you through the next couple months. So that's out there. Next month is our annual Wild at Art event, and if anybody, which will be right here at the Garden Center. We sort of take over the entire Garden Center, and we have a bunch of artists out here. It's Friday and Saturday, November 8th and 9th, and we do need some help. We'll have a table with information about Tulsa Audubon for the customers to come, because we want them and Wild at Art is mostly run by our Wing It group, which is the wildlife rehabbers in Tulsa Audubon. And they do a really fantastic job, and we've got some really cool artists that'll be here. So I encourage you to come on out those days, just to come out and see the artists, and hopefully you find something good to purchase. You know, it makes good timing for Christmas. And if anybody would like to come help, just man our Tulsa Audubon table for a few hours on Friday or Saturday. That would be a great help also. Okay, we have our next kids bird walk coming up on October 19th. That is, Jeff, you need to come up here, Jeff, and talk.
Oh, now I'm on TV. Okay. Hi, Saturday morning, October 19th, 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. at Ray Harrell Nature Center out in Broken Arrow. Kids of all ages, 8 months to 800 years. If you're old as Methuselah or young as a baby infant, we'll have binoculars. If you have binoculars, bring them, but Tulsa Audubon has a bunch of binoculars to loan out. 2 hours, no experience needed. We'll just walk around and see whatever birds are out there, and it's really geared towards young birders, kids. Like I said, kids of all ages, but specifically ages 8 to 18. But if they're 2 years old and have a parent with them, that's great. So come on down. I'll be around afterwards if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So let's see, some of our other upcoming events. We got the seasonal the kids bird walk, Wild at Art, and the next month our speaker is Dr. Doug Wood. He's going to be talking about the Malaysian Peninsula and Borneo, and he's one of our. Dr. Wood is one of our favorite speakers. I think we have him he's sort of an annual speaker for us, because every year he takes an interesting trip, some part of the globe. So. Come back and join us next month at that meeting. Okay, bird walking. Who brought our snacks tonight?
Nobody wants to own up to
Our refreshments tonight were furnished by Cheryl Kilpatrick and Jim Deming, so I think we need to give them a hand. And I'm going to pass the chart around and ask you to sign up. We usually ask people to bring 2 items, and I always call and remind you, and if you can't do it, we'll fill in for you. So go ahead and sign up and hope for the best. Thank you.
And you don't have to cook anything fancy. A bag of Oreos is wonderful. So don't worry about Oreos. Okay. Okay. Are there any other announcements I'm forgetting to make? If not, I'll have Cheryl Kilpatrick come up and introduce our speaker.
Our speaker tonight is Dr. Ray Morantz, who is director of the Xerces Society. Yes, I just promoted you. He works for the... Darn, every time I have to do something like that. Anyway, he'll tell you about the society, and he's going to be talking about pollinators in Oklahoma, preserving them, restoring habitat, and maintaining habitat for pollinators. Dr. Morantz did his undergraduate work at Cornell.
Studying what? Birds.
Ornithology. And then he came to Oklahoma and did his PhD at Oklahoma State. So I'm going to let him tell you the rest.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl. Can you all hear me? Can we turn some of the lights off, or?
If you stand at the podium until I get the mic fixed, you will have audio.
Very good. Excellent. Yep, sounds great. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here, folks. I've come over from Stillwater. I think this is the 10th talk I've given in Tulsa this year, so I hope you're not sick of me. Some people will be after tonight, I'm sure. The main theme of my talk tonight, it struck me as I was driving here today on the Cimarron Turnpike, how we've got lots and lots of native habitat in Oklahoma. Lots of prairie, lots of forest. Not enough of either, but we have a lot more than, let's say, Iowa, some of the other prairie states. But I saw almost nothing in flower. And I'm a monarch biologist, first and foremost. And the monarchs, there's still some monarchs in the state. Some of you saw some today migrating south. They need food, but there's very little food for them on our roadsides right now. Not sure why. Overall, there's not enough food for our pollinators. And I challenge all of you, many of you are already helping the pollinators, but I challenge everybody in here to please strive to plant more flowers for pollinators. It's that simple. Plant more stuff, use less pesticides, and we will have healthier pollinator populations and healthier ecosystems because of it. So that's theme 1. Theme number 2 came up at dinner time. I met a teacher from Jenks High. Last name Humphrey, right? Mr. Humphrey? Yeah. Mr. Humphrey. And he amazed me in telling me that he teaches ornithology in high school. That's outrageous. I would like the ornithology students to please stand. Woo! Very impressive, guys. You guys are the future birders of this country, and that's really, really important. The third theme, and Mr. Humphrey brought this up, is the importance of women in science. And here's a little secret. I work for a woman. My last boss was a woman. My boss before that was a woman. Almost all my bosses in science have been women, and they've been my best bosses. My boss at home is a woman also. So he wanted to encourage the gals in his class to not be afraid of going into science. There's no doubt about it. There's women at the highest levels of science in ornithology, in butterflyology, all of these things. So don't be afraid. It's a fun career. Okay, let me really get past the themes and into the meat. Is this working now? I think it is.
So I work for the Xerces Society, a nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon, that strives to save the invertebrates of the world, the insects, the spiders, the crayfish, things like that. We have a heavy focus on invertebrates. How did we get our strange name? What movie have you seen that has somebody named Xerces? 300. The movie 300. And he's some weird naked god guy who's sort of creepy. We are not named after him. Definitely not. We're named after this butterfly, which is named after him, by the way. The butterfly is named after him, but we're not. We're named after the Xerces blue, beautiful little butterfly that lived out in California, but it went extinct due to all the development around San Francisco. So a group of Western ecologists and butterfly lovers got together and formed the Xerces Society in honor of this butterfly and in honor of the concept that we were going to make sure that this never happened again. We were going to fight to keep things from going extinct. This is a photo of our whole crew. We've got about 60 employees nationwide. This was at our retreat in Portland. I'm the guy with the shades, sort of in the middle. What do you notice about the sex ratio at the Xerces Society? It's about 70-30 female to male, overwhelmingly female organization. And the women are at all levels of success. Believe it or not, I have another employer, and that is the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, also known as the NRCS. And their mission is to help farmers and ranchers conserve natural resources. What's the connection between these two employers? Well, I'm sorry, skip the slide. The NRCS is required by law to help pollinators. The 2008 Farm Bill mandated that all federal natural resource agencies need to help pollinators. So the NRCS has a contract with the Xerces Society to have me in Stillwater helping with pollinators. How are pollinators doing? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. What we're looking at here are a bunch of titles of journal articles showing various pollinator species or taxa doing poorly. Excuse me. The one I work with most is the monarch butterfly. This graphic, of course, came from Monarch Watch. We have a Monarch Watch. What's your title? Conservation Specialist. Sandy Schwinn right there. Many of you know Sandy, and she's awesome, has influenced so many Oklahomans in conservation. But this graph, the main idea of this bar chart, of course, is that from the 90s, there has been a big decrease in the abundance of monarchs that fly to the overwintering colonies in Mexico. My job exists because of this year. Right here, the winter of 13 and 14, there were so few monarchs down in Mexico that it caused people to band together, including Professor Lincoln Brower, who worked with the Xerces Society to write a petition to the government to list the monarch as an endangered species. Because people are worried about monarchs, that helped create new jobs like mine. By the way, this is representing the population of monarchs east of the Rocky Mountains. What about west of the Rocky Mountains? How many monarchs are there west of the Rocky Mountains? Does anybody know?
Not very many.
Not very many. Elizabeth?
Isn't it 30,000 last year?
30,000 lower. Higher than zero. Here's the number. 28,429. Believe it or not, we counted every one. The Xerces Society did. We have about 150, 200 volunteers that goes to all the sites in California, and there are so few left, we can count them all, which is very depressing. In Mexico, you can't count them all. There's still millions. But in California, you can count every one. Thus far, my coworkers on a phone call the other day said this year looks a little better. But we'll see. We collect the data around Thanksgiving. Okay. So pollinators need help from everybody in here. And it's easy to help pollinators. Habitat is the key, just like it is with birds. Give them the right habitat, and you're going to get a diverse assemblage of bees and butterflies. So specifically with habitat, they need food, which ends up being nectar for butterflies, nectar and pollen for bees, and then host plants. What needs the host plants? Caterpillars of butterflies, caterpillars of moths. Also, the larvae of some beetles and flies have host plants. Also, they need shelter. The bees need nesting sites. Many species need overwintering sites. They all need overwintering sites. And then finally, the third aspect of habitat to really think about is safety from pesticides. Pesticides are a huge, huge problem with pollinators. Many of our pollinators are very vulnerable to them. So, what can we do to establish more habitat? Plant a wide variety of species, preferably native species. Now, I am not a purist. If you were to visit my 10-acre farm in Stillwater, you would see that I grow tomatoes, which are non-native, and I grow irises and daffodils, which are non-native, but I try to avoid planting exotic plants that are going to spread and take over. I focus heavily on planting native species, and already I think I'm up to 12 species, 12 native milkweed species. I know Sandy's got more than that, but I'm working to catch Sandy Schwinn. But many, I've got 10 acres, so I got a lot of room to plant more native plants. So where can we provide habitat? Basic areas, roadsides. Like I mentioned, driving over on the Cimarron Turnpike, didn't see much blooming. The good news is they hadn't mowed it yet. If there were flowers there, at least they hadn't gotten mowed. And Oklahoma DOT is working to create habitat on roadsides, has been working to help monarch butterflies. They are doing good things, but we need to help them by encouraging more funding for wildflower plantings on the roadsides. Along the roadsides of the US, there are 17 million acres of habitat. That's a lot of room to do a lot of good for our pollinators. Gardens and yards, obviously, we can do lots of good things in our gardens and yards. Gardens can be some of the highest quality habitat because they're easy to control. It's easy to plant a high diversity of native plants. Farms are awfully important for pollinators as well. So specifically, I'm going to talk about spaces on farms where you can put habitat. Let's see. First, I have a question. Raise your hand if you own a farm or a large acreage. Okay, about 3 or 4 of you. Raise your hand if you know somebody who has a farm or a large acreage. A lot more of you. That's part of the beauty of Oklahoma, is that even if we don't own acreage, we usually are related to somebody or friends with somebody who does. You go to some other places out in California, New York, all their social circles are all urban. But here in Oklahoma, we're more connected to the land. So even though you don't own a farm, I hope this information you could maybe relay to some of your relatives and friends. One place where we can put habitat on a farm is something called a field border. Very simple. Just at the edge of the field, plant some native wildflowers, some perennials. Another spot, you can put something called an insectary strip. An insectary strip is you're planting annual flowers that provide a little bit of food for your pollinators for 1 year. Cover crops. Why do farmers have cover crops? To feed the bugs. The main reason they have it is to improve their soil, is to keep the soil from flying away. In Oklahoma, that's particularly important. And also to add carbon to the soil, add nitrogen using legumes. Well, as long as you're planting a cover crop, consider putting cover crops to have flowers, like clovers or partridge pea. Filter strips. Imagine a farm. Imagine all the fertilizer that gets applied, and if you're a conventional farmer, pesticides that are getting applied to the crop. Where do those go? Some of them stay in the soil, but a lot of them end up getting carried downhill into our creeks and rivers. But if you plant a filter strip, plant some habitat, that can catch some of those chemicals and intercept them before they go into the water. And I'm going to skip through these others. Farm practices how a farmer operates can really affect our pollinators. Where do bees nest? Honeybees nests in hives. But I skipped a very important slide that I usually show. How many types of native bees are there in Oklahoma? About 500. 4,000 in the US, 500 in Oklahoma. So when we think of bees, we almost always think of honeybees. But there are 500 other kind of bees that have been here a lot longer than honeybees. They're not as important as honeybees for crops. No, not any one native bee is as important as the honeybee. But when you add them all together, they're awfully important for agriculture in Oklahoma, the US, and the world. Well, it turns out that 70% of our native bees nest underground. 70%. So if you're a farmer and you plow up your soil, you till your land each year, you're killing a lot of bees. So we encourage farmers to consider no-till agriculture. This is exceptionally important thing for farmers and gardeners. Please try to reduce the use of pesticides. And if you are going to use pesticides, be sure to use them. Be sure to follow the label and try not to use them on windy days and things like that. Or use pesticides that are less harmful. This bumblebee I'm showing is part of quite a lot of bumblebees. Tens of thousands of bumblebees that were killed in a single day outside of Portland, Oregon. The bumblebees were going to the basswood trees because the basswood trees were flowering. And then this was at a shopping mall. And then maintenance guys at the shopping mall sprayed the trees with insecticides and killed tens of thousands of bumblebees. Bumblebees are amazing crop pollinators. They pollinate tomatoes much better than honeybees do. So we definitely want to keep all our bumblebees. One class of chemicals we're particularly interested in are the neonicotinoids, also known as neonics. When I say interested, we're worried about them. Studies have already come out showing neonicotinoids can be very fatal to bees, meaning the amounts that are actually out there in nature are fatal to bees. Neonicotinoids are a systemic insecticide. If they put neonics on a seed and the seed germinates, those neonics go throughout the plant into the stem, the leaves, the flowers, the nectar, and the pollen, so that when bees and butterflies go to visit the flowers, they end up getting poisoned. So something we definitely, we at Xerces Society strongly encourage folks to avoid use of neonics. I believe Germany is starting to ban neonics if they haven't done so already. And these are being used by many, many farmers in the US, so it's a big deal. 90% of the corn grown in the country is treated with neonics.
Ray, can I ask a question? Just
Of course.
Quick on that?
Sure.
Okay, so if we, in our minds, we're hearing go plant perennials.
Yep.
So if I go to Lowe's or Home Depot and I get some perennials, some of those do have
From what I have been told, yes, that
Now, do they, is there like how many generations do the neonicotinoids stay in?
I think the neonics disappear within months, weeks, or days, depending on the situation. But certainly they can last months. They're not going to last
In
years.
other words, then, if I screwed up and bought something this year and planted it, it's a perennial, it's going to come up again next year?
Should be fine.
It should be fine. Okay,
Yep,
good.
should be fine next year. You don't rip it out.
All right.
Should be okay. We encourage folks to reduce the use of pesticides if you can. Studies, particularly in Europe, have shown that farms can be just as profitable when they reduce their pesticide use by up to 42%. Also consider other options. We have a whole list of options like BT spray. What's BT? Bacillus thuringiensis. Now that's not necessarily great for butterflies, but at least it's probably going to be less harmful for bees. Try to use insect repellents like citrus oil or garlic oil, insecticidal soaps, pheromone traps. When I was 12, my job was to put out pheromone traps to trap Japanese beetles. And these traps, pheromones, these chemicals that attract the male Japanese beetles, the beetles would go in the traps thinking they were finding a female, and I'd trap like 5,000 of them, and that was my job to dip them in boiling water and kill them all.
Does that attract ladybugs also, or just the Japanese beetle?
Boy, that was just Japanese beetles. That pheromone was specific to Japanese beetles. Now, this was a long time ago, but it really worked. I killed a heck of a lot of Japanese beetles as a kid. Okay, I think I skipped one. Organic insecticides. They sound good, and they are, in general, safer than our other insecticides. But some of them can be quite dangerous to bees. Just because they're organic doesn't mean they're not going to kill bees. We're using them because they kill insects. And bees are insects. Butterflies are insects. I actually have a document on that table that goes through a list of organic pesticides and talks about their threats to bees. Herbicides can be an issue. Herbicides certainly, if they're used too much, can kill all the plants that our bees would use. What's the most famous herbicide? Roundup, exactly. Roundup is often used, the chemical glyphosate is often used in the conservation business to kill exotic plants. My wife is terrified of Roundup, and she doesn't want me to using it at home. So there's a big debate about that. It's a fascinating debate. Should it be used or not? In my position, in my job, my connection to NRCS, I'm not really allowed to give an opinion, to be frank. But we need to consider these things. There we go. Okay, how do you plant habitat for pollinators? It's a 5-step process. The first step, phase 1, select your site. Figure out where you're going to put it. Where do you not put pollinator habitat? I want it in the shade. I want it by your house. I want pollinator habitat just about everywhere. But where should you not put it? Given that the topic I was just talking about.
By the road.
Roads are okay too.
Well, not in Tulsa County.
Why not? Why?
Spray Roundup.
Okay. You don't want to put pollinator habitat anywhere where it's really likely to get treated with insecticides. So if you've got a farmer who's spraying his entire crop with insecticide each year and you plant some pollinator habitat like right next to it, there's a good chance you're going to be attracting bees and getting them poisoned. But just about everywhere else is good. Phase 2, planning and design. You figure out what kind of habitat you want to make, what plants to plant. The focus of my work is figuring out what plants work best for Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Louisiana. Believe it or not, I cover all those states. Trying to figure out what plants are best for pollinators in those states in each habitat type. So I can provide you guidance. Elizabeth, would you stand up, please? Elizabeth Elliott works for Quail Forever and the NRCS. And she works on saving pollinators just like I do. And she's an expert. So, and she covers eastern Oklahoma, and I pretty much do not. So not as much as she does. So she is a wonderful resource. If you want to build a prairie, obviously plant some native prairie forbs like Joe Pieweed or swamp sunflower. If you want to plant an insectary strip, again, annual habitat, you can plant things like sunflowers or cilantro or dill. Dill, cilantro, things that we like to eat, these are good for pollinators too.
Go back to that previous slide.
Sure. Yes. Do you like that one? You've got it? Yeah, swamp sunflower. It's in bloom. It's just coming out of bloom right now. It's really easy to grow. Really easy to grow. Okay, next group. Before you plant a prairie meadow, you need to get rid of the weeds. On my land, I have a lot of Bermuda grass. I need to find a way to get rid of the Bermuda grass because it's hard to plant native wildflowers where you've got Bermuda grass. So the easiest option by far is to get out a herbicide and spray the heck out of your Bermuda grass and kill it. And maybe you'll have to do it, spray it again 4 weeks from now, and again 4 weeks after that. But you can kill it dead without that much work. A more organic approach, maybe a safer approach, is to do something called solarization. And I think you get the idea of what's happening here. You buy a giant sheet of clear plastic, put it over the area where you want to kill the weeds. This works really well in Oklahoma. In some of the colder places, it doesn't work. But you're cooking. What you're doing, you're getting any seeds there to try to germinate, and then it kills the seedlings. Or maybe the heat gets so high that you're denaturing the proteins, the enzymes in the seeds. So that's a nice way to prepare your site for pollinator habitat.
How long does that normally take?
A few months. A few months. You'd start it in spring, and you could be done by late summer. Okay, phase 4, planting. This is my favorite phase, I think. I love planting stuff. And you have to make the decision, am I going to be planting seeds or transplants? If you're planting a garden, transplants work just fine. If you're planting 3 acres of habitat, you're going to want to buy seeds. And we do have a few native seed vendors in Oklahoma, or you can go out of state. And Elizabeth, I'm sure, is an expert in giving guidance as to what seeds you should buy, how many pounds of seed per acre, things like that. So, the year you plant, in May, let's say you've cleared the land and you're going to do a spring planting. You rake the soil and then you plant. That summer, it's probably going to look pretty crappy. There are going to be a lot of weeds. I went to one in Louisiana, a site in Louisiana 3 weeks ago. It got planted in April. The ragweed was 8 feet tall, solid. It would have been hard to walk through it. Yeah. So this gentleman made an important mistake. Now, it's okay to have ragweed. That's natural. Like, we want it to go away, and it will go away in time. But he needed to do phase 5, which is management. All he needed to do was mow it a few times in the middle of summer, and that would have knocked the ragweed way back. But here's what it looks when you plant it. And I think I skipped a year or not. Whoops. So the next year, this is pretty good. This is pretty good if you can get it looking good that year. And then the following year, better still. And I have some pictures of restorations at my house to show later in the talk. I believe so. I said phase 4 was the funnest part. This is really the funnest part, phase 5. So that photo is not me, but I've done 40 prescribed burns. And I hate risk. I'm a cowardly person, but I love fires. I love lighting prairies on fire. And I've done this in Oklahoma, Iowa. In Florida, we lit forests on fire. Trying just to burn a low fire, to burn any of the weeds and stuff down low, and protect the big pine trees. Fire or grazing or mowing is critical to maintaining prairie in Oklahoma. If you go to the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Oklahoma, in Osage County, what do? They burn it. It's 40,000 acres, and they burn, 5 to 10,000 acres every year. You should go up there in spring and see it. By the way, plenty of women doing this prescribed burning stuff. And it's even more exciting than it looks. Of the 40 that I've been on 2 where they got out of hand, and I did worry I was going to get burned up. Usually the averages aren't that bad. There's a professor at OSU who has done over 1,000 burns. So it's not that dangerous, but it is very exciting. Grazing. Can cattle be compatible with pollinators? They can be if you don't have too many cattle. I think you all have seen rangeland or pastures where everything's grazed down about 2 inches off the ground. Well, there's nothing for the bees or butterflies to eat. So overgrazing can be harmful to our pollinators. But moderate grazing, some people argue, is terrific. Prescribed fire is a wonderful way of maintaining our native ecosystems. But some of our pollinators are vulnerable to fire, some of our bees and butterflies. So we encourage folks, burn the whole thing. If you burn the whole thing and you have a pollinator population vulnerable to fire, you could incinerate the entire thing. There it is. There it is. Thank you. After you have cattle grazing, consider letting the land rest for a while so that the wildflowers have time to recover. Where can you get more information? Well, the best thing that my company does I need help. We make lots and lots of documents. And on those tables up at the front, I have about 20 or 30 different documents that are all free for y'all. They're all available at our website, xerces.org. This is one of our, these two are extremely popular. These are lists of plants you can plant. The list on the left is for monarchs. On the right is a list for pollinators in general for our region. This is something that I just wrote up and published a few weeks ago, a guide to milkweeds of Oklahoma and Texas. If you want to learn how to identify milkweeds, please grab one of these off the table. If you're a farmer interested in more information on how to farm for pollinators, we can help. Go skip this one. If you want to learn about pesticides that are safer for bees, we've got it. How to establish meadows, we've got it. If you want to learn how to use NRCS funding to help monarch butterflies, we've got a publication on that. So who might have money for you? Well, the big source of funding is the NRCS and the Farm Service Agency. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a year being spent just to help monarch butterflies in Oklahoma. It's a big deal.
How much land do you have to do that?
The amount of land isn't the kicker. You could get help with just 2 or 3 or 4 acres, but you need to have an agricultural product. You need to have cattle. You need to be getting some money off the land. I did not qualify for NRCS money, but I qualified for a different pot of money that I'll tell you about in a minute.
What about bees and honey? Would they qualify?
Bees and honey, I think you wouldn't qualify for monarch butterfly money, but you could qualify for pollinator, help with pollinator habitat. I really think that's quite feasible. So I want to talk about a case study. The gentleman on the right is Bruce Reynolds. He's a rancher in southern Oklahoma. He had 1,700 acres that used to be great rangeland, but got totally covered up with cedar trees. Bad for birds, except for a few birds that like cedars. Y'all would know which ones those are. Bad for butterflies, and really bad for beef production. So he applied to NRCS for funding, got funding, and that enabled him to bring bulldozers in. Yeah, it seems like a rough way to do things, but that was the most cost-effective way to do it. Bring bulldozers in and bulldoze thousands and thousands of cedar trees, and then light them on fire. Obviously, he had some massive conflagrations on his property. That's what the cedar trees look after they've sat and dried out for a while. You light that on fire, you'll get flames 60 feet tall. I've seen it. It's pretty awesome. There's just no doubt, nobody goes away from that unimpressed. It's exciting work. Oh, that actually is me doing a burn up in Iowa years ago. So what did Bruce's ranch look like after they knocked down the cedars and burned it? Full of pollinators, full of flowers for pollinators. It was amazing. So if you are a landowner or know somebody who is, I encourage you to go to your county USDA office, spend 10 minutes filling out this form. This gets you registered, gets you started in the process. When I did this, that's actually my form that I filled out. That took me 10 minutes. Once I filled out, then my buddy Lloyd, my coworker, came to my property and evaluated my property. This is my land in Payne County. Gave me advice, gave me this amazing plan, highly detailed plan about how to improve my property for pollinators. And then I went to Anita with the Conservation District, and she actually had money for me, $1,400. She gave me $1,400 to help me chop down cedar trees on my property. It ended up costing a lot more than $1,400, but at least I got some help. So this is my land 13 months ago. Tons and tons of cedar trees. What's it look like under there? What's it look down on the ground? What's growing underneath those cedars? Nothing. That's what's growing there. Like you said, absolutely nothing. Horrible, horrible for bees and butterflies. Oh, there are a couple little green things, but very, very little. It was wretched. So I got some money, bought some chainsaws, oh rats, cut down hundreds of trees, hired somebody to cut down about 800 trees, because I don't have time to cut down 800. And I had big ones. I had cedar trees this big around, this big in diameter. And here's a spot that used to be cedar. Used to be cedar trees. This is a few weeks ago. Amazing pollinator habitat.
What's the plant?
This one is bearded beggar's ticks, Biden's aristosa. Exceptionally easy to grow. I planted, the seeds for this probably cost $2 or $3. I'm going to have pounds and pounds of seed to harvest and give away. Here's more of it. Close up. So takeaway message of my first presentation. By the way, I have another one. It's much shorter, and it's videos of monarchs in Mexico. Takeaway message, please create habitat wherever you can. I have to mention, oh God, donors make it possible. Xerces Society is a nonprofit. I encourage folks to become a member. If you're interested in becoming a member or at least getting an email from each month with information about what we're discovering, I have a clipboard up front that I'll put on the back table. I want to thank Tulsa Audubon for inviting me and the USDA NRCS for sponsoring my work. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Welcome any questions. Any questions?
Lights.
Lights, please. Thanks. Good idea.
Do you want to do the video?
You know what? If you could show that video that was 003, I think. Questions? Yes?
Do you have funding sources for schools that want to do something?
Are there funding sources for schools that want to do stuff? Xerces Society does not have them, and to my knowledge, NRCS does not have them. There are other sources. I do know of schools. Stillwater Middle School applied for money to create gardens, and they created pollinator gardens. So it is possible.
Monarch Watch provides a grant.
Of course.
So you can get milkweeds
Of course.
at schools free.
If you have an acreage, you can go 2 acres or more, you can get free milkweed plants from Monarch Watch. By the way, this is just a background video. This is a patch of golden crownbeard, my favorite nectar source. And it's hard to see with the light on, but there are hundreds of bees and butterflies on this. This was taken in October a couple years ago, just showing just how abundant our pollinators can be. You go to other parts of the country, you're not going to see this. Oklahoma is quite special in our abundance of pollinators. The time to do this work is now. We've never had so many resources, informational and monetary, to do this kind of work.